Good to go, Nick?
Uh, just waiting for, there we go. Numbers are starting to climb. We are good to go.
Thank you. Good morning. This is Ed Hamrick, Assistant Attorney General, and I represent the State Board of Land Commissioners. And today is November 13th. The board has been in executive session to discuss the two cases that were noticed for executive session, the Rangeview water application and the Cadgene versus the State of Colorado appeal. The discussion in executive session was limited to privileged attorney-client communication, and no board actions were taken in executive session. The board is now back on the record and ready to proceed with its regular agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. And welcome everybody to the November meeting of the State Board of Land Commissioners. I'd like to ask the audience if there are any comments on any non-agenda items that you'd like to share with us.
So folks listening along, if you'd like to address the board on anything that was not part of our published agenda for this meeting, please use the raise hand button on your screen. Just as a note, in registering for the webinar, we missed a complete agenda where you could indicate that you had a desire to register for specific items. So apologies for that, but the agenda was published in its normal places anyway. So again, members of the public, if you'd like to address the board on an item that is not part of today's agenda, raise that hand. I'm not seeing any hands raised, Commissioner.
Thank you, Nick. Turning it over to Director Ryan for any announcements you'd like to share.
No announcements, Madam Chair.
All right, then moving on to welcome Aaron Ray and our report from the Department of Natural Resources. Hello, Aaron.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. My name is Aaron Ray, Assistant Director for Energy in the Executive Director's Office of the Department of Natural Resources. Glad to be with you again virtually to provide the department's update to the board this morning. Starting on the budget and legislative front, on November 1st, Governor Polis released the 2025-26 Governor's Budget Proposal. While many state agencies face significant budget cuts due to the state's nearly $900 million budget shortfall, DNR divisions are still able to pursue some targeted investments in our priorities. A few highlights from the governor's budget proposal. DNR requested a total of 64 new staff positions across our divisions and just over $524 million in total for DNR operations and capital projects. Notably, the request includes investments in our workforce, including additional internship opportunities here at the State Land Board, which we're excited about, and in the Colorado State Forest Service. It also includes the first significant investments of Keep Colorado Wild Pass revenue of about $30 million to manage and protect Colorado State Park System and the outdoors. That investment will support new park and wildlife acres, dozens of new campsites, capital construction projects across our state parks, and staffing within the park system. And lastly, I'll note that the budget includes additional funding in the Outdoor Equity Grant Program of about $1.3 million for a total funding, annual funding of $4 million to support outdoor access and opportunities for youth and families from communities traditionally underrepresented in outdoor recreation. So while we expect challenging budget development over the course of this session, there are a number of priorities that DNR is excited to be able to pursue. I'll also note that the governor's agenda includes 6 legislative proposals that we'll be pursuing in the upcoming session, in addition to our annual water projects and species conservation trust fund bills. Our legislative priorities are really focused on advancing the department's strategic priorities, including biodiversity, balancing conservation and recreation, facilitating the energy transition, enhancing tribal engagement, and strengthening climate resilience. And I think you'll see those priorities as I outlined very briefly, the 6 legislative proposals we're pursuing. The first is to strengthen Colorado Parks and Wildlife's ability to tackle wildlife trafficking in and out of Colorado. The bill would explicitly define and create penalties and statute for wildlife trafficking, increase enforcement capacity to be able to better address wildlife trafficking, and increased monitoring of the biological and ecological impacts of wildlife trafficking in the state. Our next priority proposes free access to all Colorado state parks for enrolled members of the Southern Ute and Mountain Ute Indian tribes. The proposal recognizes that those tribes are the oldest continuous residents of what is now the state of Colorado and have significant historical and cultural ties to the majority of the land within the state. We are currently conducting formal consultation with the two tribes to flesh out the details of that proposal, but we think it's an important step for our state park system. Our third item would facilitate the reclamation of abandoned hard rock mines across the state. The Division of Reclamation, Mining, and Safety estimates there are approximately 5,000 abandoned hard rock mine sites that could be reclaimed to reduce their impact on our land and waters. And so this bill would facilitate the cleanup of those sites by creating a new permit that's geared toward reclamation-only projects. Currently, any project has to get a mining permit, which is really focused on regulating new mining. And so we think a permit specifically targeted toward reclamation would ensure continued appropriate regulation of those activities, but make it easier for projects that are focused only on reclaiming abandoned sites. Next, we have a proposal to improve water supply forecasting, snowpack measurement, and floodplain mapping here in Colorado. That bill would enable the CWCB to lead the management of a statewide snowpack measurement program and create a statutorily defined water supply forecasting program within CWCB. Ultimately, the goal is to assist the state in planning for population growth and environmental changes and provide new flood monitoring tools to build resilience and the mitigation of severe floods. Next, we have a proposal to improve the regulation of carbon sequestration projects in the state. As I think this group is aware, ECMC is currently undertaking a rulemaking to establish regulations for Class 6 carbon sequestration wells and preparing to apply to the US EPA for primacy to regulate those wells under the Safe Drinking Water Act. Those rules govern the siting, permitting, operation, and closure of Class 6 wells. We have the authority to adopt those rules, and as I mentioned, ECMC is in the process of doing that. What we would be proposing is a new enterprise to address the long-term stewardship of those sites after they have been successfully closed. Once a Class 6 facility meets all the state standards for closure, the enterprise will become responsible for the long-term monitoring and stewardship of those sites. And that enterprise will be funded by a fee on geologic storage operators to provide the resources to do that work into the future. So it would give operators certainty about their long-term obligations, and it would protect the state taxpayers from the need to provide resources to fund that work in the future. And then just very quickly, we have a legislative proposal to make process improvements and streamline administrative work within the Division of Water Resources. That would modernize the process to expire large capacity water well permits. It'll eliminate the need for non-Denver Basin bedrock aquifer wells within the designated basin to obtain a final permit. And it would better distribute the workload associated with water rights abandonment processes at DWR within their administrative work. And then in addition to those 6 proposals, ECMC and DWR are completing a study of ways to further support geothermal development in the state. That study is due to be completed in December, so we don't have the final recommendations yet, but it's likely the department will seek statutory changes that align with the recommendations of that report on geothermal development. So I want to stop there because that's a lot. Any questions about the budget or legislative package before I move to updates in other areas?
I don't see any, Aaron.
Well, if there's anything you heard that perked up your ears and you'd like to know more, please reach out to me and we'll get you connected with the right people. Turning to federal affairs, last week, Governor Polis and DNR applauded the Bureau of Land Management's release of the final Greater Sage-Grouse Resource Management Plan amendment. We also expect that the Biden administration will finalize several other outstanding plans in the coming weeks, including BLM's Uncompahgre Resource Management Plan Amendment, BLM's Western Solar Plan, and the U.S. Forest Service's Old Growth Plan Amendment. So we expect federal action on those plans this fall. We're also tracking legislation that might be passed during a lame duck session in Congress, including the Endangered Fish Recovery Program reauthorization, the Good Samaritan Remediation of Abandoned Hard Rock Mines Act, the Stop the Spread of Invasive Mussels Act, and the Finish the Arkansas Valley Conduit Act. So potential federal action legislatively this fall as well. On the energy front, as I noted, ECMC has noticed the Class 6 rulemaking to begin December 2nd. Draft rules are available on ECMC's website for folks that are interested. There'll be 2 virtual stakeholder meetings to discuss those proposed rules on November 14th and November 22nd. And that rulemaking will form the foundation for the state's application to the US EPA to gain primacy over Class 6 injection wells. We anticipate that application will be submitted in early 2025. ECMC has also noticed the produced water rulemaking, which is set to begin December 11th. Draft rules also available on our website, and written public comments on those draft rules are being accepted through December 6th if folks would like to submit comments. As required by House Bill 23-1242, that rulemaking establishes a schedule for increasing the use of recycled produced water and decreasing the use of fresh water in oil and gas operations. And lastly, at ECMC, that division will be completing 3 legislative directed studies by the end of the year. Those studies include a report on the state's regulation of pipelines. It's being completed with the Public Utilities Commission. That study is due on December 1st. A study of the regulation of underground injection wells in Colorado. That study also due December 1st. There are 6 classes of injection wells regulated by the US EPA. Colorado has primacy over Class 2. We're pursuing primacy over Class 6. And this study will review the opportunities related with Classes 1, 3, 4, and 5 underground injection wells. And then, as I mentioned, ECMC and DWR are working on a study of statutory and regulatory changes related to deep geothermal development. That report's due on the 31st of December and could be the basis for additional legislative proposals in the upcoming session. Turning to forestry, the Colorado Strategic Wildfire Action Program just closed its 3rd round of workforce development grant funding. We received 2 applications for Youth Conservation Corps projects on state land board land. One of those, the Twin Sisters project, was reviewed and is moving forward with an award to the Larimer County Conservation Corps. So excited about that project. Also note that COSWAP's 2024 Landscape Resilience Investment Program is partnering with CWCB's Wildfire Ready Watersheds program to identify projects that cross the boundary between forest health and watershed protection. We've invited 6 entities to apply for those grants and awards we made at the beginning of calendar year 2025. Just a couple of more updates on Parks and Wildlife. DNR has been coordinating with the governor's office, with GOCO, and with CPW on stakeholder outreach on the draft Colorado outdoor strategy. We're in the process of incorporating feedback received through more than 60 meetings and about 1,000 comments. So it's a heavy lift, and we'll soon begin working on implementing that strategy in early 2025. CPW is the long-term steward of the Colorado outdoor strategy, and we'd be happy to present more information to the board about the implementation of that plan once the draft is final. And then lastly, on water, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation launched a large new grant program for environmental drought resilience projects. That's referred to as the B2E funding program. We know that many Colorado entities are pursuing the funding, and we are expecting to see projects that include riparian restoration, fish passage, and habitat connectivity, as well as invasive species removal and wetland restoration. So we're excited about some of that funding coming to Colorado. With that, I'll conclude my remarks. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you so much, Aaron. That was a very fulsome report, and I appreciated hearing the highlights of the government's budget. And it also helped having the DNR, I think Dan Gibbs sent out an email too, with some of those highlights, which is great. There's a lot packed into that.
Yeah, there certainly is. Thanks for the opportunity. And again, if there's anything you'd like to follow up on, please just let me know. And with that, have a good meeting.
Will do. Thank you. All righty. Turning to Director Ryan for your staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Frobe. A few highlights for you all. First, as always, I just want to note that you have given staff the authority to do a lot of work within the boundaries of policy, and we took 91 lease actions during the month this month. So as a reminder, you see a small subset of the work we do because of the way our policies work. But second, with regard to staffing, a few notes for Kristen Kemp's position. That closed a couple of weeks ago. We ended up with 127 qualified applications, and we are culling that down to a list of 6 that we'll be interviewing, and we're working with HR right now to get those interviews set up. But it was a really interesting list of candidates there. So excited about that. We have 3 biodiversity related FTEs out in the market. That closed on Monday. I haven't heard what the final tallies are from DNR HR yet, but hope to have a robust applicant pool there. And lastly, I want to make sure I formally introduce our new member of the TRS team. Alex Sloan joined us this month. He's going to be the recreation technician supporting Abe and the rec program, and he'll be working on Andy Bissett's team, but with a pretty direct line to Abe Medina and the recreation program that's seen so much growth over the last few years. So Alec, welcome. I think I see you listening as an attendee. A number of staff have been out busy at presentations and such. Elliot was at the Rural Housing Forum this month. William, Mindy, and Lindsay were at the Regenerate Conference. That's sort of a regenerative agriculture conference that covers lots of really interesting topics that are important to our agricultural community partners. And it was held here in Denver this year, so that made attendance by a number of us even easier. Mindy was given a presentation on mitigation banking in Kansas City this month. So, you know, staff continues to be out and about and involved in the communities that are our critical partners. Maybe I'll just stop there and see if you all had any other questions about the report that was in the book or anything I didn't mention. Getting off
No,
easy.
thank you.
Right. Well, thank you all.
All right. Our next item is a request for review regarding the Camilletti and Sons lease. And I think, Nick, we might have some visitors who want to participate, and Elliot Hoyt is going to initiate the conversation.
Yes. Good morning. This is Elliot Hoyt, Assistant Director of Sustainability and Working Lands. Let me share my screen. Is that showing the proper slide?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. I'm here this morning to provide some context to a request for review that we've received from Edward Camilletti, representing our lessee, Camilletti and Sons Incorporated. The lease in question is number 105700. I'll give a very short presentation, and then we'll invite the Camillettis to make a statement if they wish. I believe there are also a few other parties who have asked to make comment on this item as well. Lease 105700, which is a multiple use lease, is expiring next August and will be reissued according to our current policies. This is part of an ongoing effort to standardize lease structures as directed by the board several years ago. To be clear, when the existing lease expires, we'll simply be updating the form to our standard leasing policy. The Camillettis, as lessees in good standing, will be welcome to apply for the leases and will have their statutory 118 rates on the agricultural lease. The property in question is in Routt County in the Northwest District. I know District Manager Jared Smith is also attending the Zoom in case there are any specific questions for him. As I noted earlier, the request for review is related to the expiration of lease 10570, which is a multiple use lease. We provided the lessee with written notification that the form of the lease that will be offered after the current one expires will be a standard agricultural lease for a 10-year term and a standard recreation lease for a 5-year term. I'd like to note that this property is also in the Stewardship Trust. In 1998, it was designated by the Camalettes and several other parties, both public and private. The natural values identified at nomination and expanded in 2016 were for wildlife, vegetation, and natural beauty. As part of this property's designation, a set of best management practices were established to be implemented by the lessee for the protection and enhancement of the natural values. These include requirements like using wildlife-friendly fences, developing and implementing grazing and management plans to enhance native plant diversity and foster optimal plant growth, and limiting vehicular use to establish roads and trails. The lessee provided a letter to staff requesting a review of our application of policy in this situation. That letter was provided in your board packet. It also included in your board packet were some background information on the history of multiple use leases and past decisions by the board related to them. The concerns expressed included in the potential impact to operations stemming from a segregation of agriculture and recreation leases. That was part of what their concern was. Managing the potential of conflicting objectives and balancing uses are priorities for the lessee, as they are for the land board. The Camalettes have been good stewards of the land for many years and speak from experience. The land board also has many years of experience managing layered leases on trust lands. In 2014, the board rescinded multiple use lease policies and chose to retire several other lease structures like it because they determined that those combined forms of leases and the long lease terms were not in the best interest of the trust and its beneficiaries. There were a total of 33 leases in formats like this, and every one of those has been converted to our standard lease form now, except for this one and 2 others. We are close to completing the task assigned to us 10 years ago by the board. Staff currently manages layered leases on hundreds of properties. Both agricultural and recreation lessees are required through their leases to cooperate with the other users of the land, and we have very few conflicts with that arrangement. Stipulations in the leases set requirements for the responsible management of the property with the long-term interest of the trust in mind. In addition, the fact that this property is designated as part of the Stewardship Trust means that it benefits from the special management of that program. As mentioned earlier, there are specific best management practices required of the lessee, and staff carries out additional site inspections on this property. In sum, current leasing policies do not conflict with the careful management of trust lands. We rely on our lessees as partners in caring for the properties, and we require them to work together with one another when leases overlap on the land. Cooperation is at the core of our work, and without it, we could not achieve our mission. So the staff is making the following recommendation to the board today. We recommend that the board can confirm staff operating the state trust land for separate 10-year agriculture and 5-year recreation leases in accordance with the board's lease policies and standard practices. Prior to making any action, I would like to provide an opportunity for Mr. Camaletti and others to address the board. Following their comments, I'd be happy to answer any questions myself. And as I mentioned, Jared Smith, the district manager, is available on the line as well. So at this point, I'll turn it over to you, Madam Chair, to open up for public comment if you so choose.
Yes, I believe we're inviting the Camalettes to present.
And I can progress slides that have been provided to me at Mr. Camaletti's direction.
All right, great. Well, Mr. Camaletti, we welcome you and are looking forward to your comments and your slides, apparently.
Good morning, and I appreciate everybody's review of this and take our comments into careful consideration. Anyway, my son, Rudy, is going to start this morning with our presentation.
Can everyone hear us okay?
Yes. Thank you, Rudy.
Excellent. Thanks again for the opportunity this morning. Could I ask a quick question? Does anyone know how much a polar bear weighs? Enough to break the ice. Having said that, if I could just give you a brief outline, a little bit of history, and then we'll go forth from there. The goal of the State Land Board, as written, is to earn reasonable and consistent income over time from the state trust lands and to protect and enhance their long-term productivity through sound stewardship. In 2005, we entered into the stewardship lease agreement as the citizens of Colorado voted to conserve larger portions of land for the board and schools. With the initial 20-year stewardship multi-use lease, including a rate increase every 5 years. We also have similar goals for our own ranching operation, as we're in it for the long term as well. Having said that, currently there are 3 generations of us working the land. My grandfather, Frank, who's not with us today, he's at home, my father, Ed, and myself, plus our families. We've been here in this area ranching for over 85 years and leasing the state land for 30 plus years. We began leasing in 1993 when the public access program began. This has helped us commit to the community for the long term with this extended term lease. Having said that, we're also heavily involved in our local community through various boards and associations of well-being, educational services, school board, local weed boards, farm service agency boards, Routt County Conservation District Board, local and state livestock associations, as well as volunteering for 4-H and FFA programs for the youth as well. So these state lands are quite integral to our entire ranching operation as they work well in conjunction with each other. As standalone entities, they're not quite as viable as they are if you can use them as a whole aggregate. So that being said, that is the grazing and the recreational leases as well. Our yearling operations, the grazing part of it, are managed well for long-term sustainability, which is one of the goals of the State Land Board for these public lands, because we need to be able to provide a good product moving forward, which also helps maintain the land and landscape in respect to wildlife as well. Some of our past improvements began with the National Resource Conservation Services in conjunction with the Colorado State Land Board for a reseeding and weed management plan on a good portion of our current lease. About 6,000 acres were essentially derelict farm ground that we made a plan, executed that plan as far as a reseeding and weed management situation. In conjunction with that, there has been fencing involved, a continued weed management, also continued road maintenance, as well as continuing to develop water for dispersal of not only livestock, but wildlife as well, to lessen the impacts on the land. So it is essentially, our goal is to maintain what we're doing now and continue that into the future on a longer term lease. Because not only the agriculture, but the recreational lease is primary to our operation as a whole, as we believe that they do directly complement one another. It's hard to be successful in one aspect of it without also being successful in the other one. And that we feel that if those are segregated, it is going to cause a bit of duress on either side of that fence. That being said, if they are segregated, the recreation from the ag, a major concern would be who is in charge of certain aspects of those leases, be it who's going to be in charge of maintaining the fences, the roads, the continued weed management plans, water, not only development, but also the maintenance of current water systems. And who will really be accountable to make sure that the recreation is compatible with the agricultural side of things as well, as they are going to be somewhat overlapping. And we can definitely see an issue with that, as we have neighbors in similar situations, not on public land, but on private land, that are leasing it separately from one another, be it the agricultural and the recreation side of things, and they are having issues with each other and compatibility. Also, if these are not maintained the way they are now, there's a lot of commingled private land in with the state lease that's going to raise a lot of concerns about accessibility issues, and things of that nature. And we don't feel that a shorter term lease is going to be the most beneficial as far as stewardship toward the land or animals either, mainly livestock, because we feel that a shorter term lease from a possible outside party may invoke the passion for the land that we feel that we have through a longer term lease. We treat it as our own because we must take care of it or it will not take care of us. Go ahead.
And on another note, we were paying for a special use hunting permit or any recreation leases were required by the state land board. We voluntarily paid a recreational use on the state lands because it used to be included without a fee or without regulation as use with grazing in 1993. This property, for which a multiple use has been in effect, was exempt from enrollment in the public access program for that reason. And just of note, we were paying a much higher rate for our recreational than the public access program was offering. We've worked with the operators at 20 Mile Coal, Peabody Energy Company, Sage Creek Land and Reserves in its mining operation, and many other old existing oil wells, which some are being reclaimed now, others are still in operation, to help facilitate, mineral revenues for the state land board. Multiple lessees on the state land might have a negative impact, might not, on those relationships and future revenues with the state land board. In conclusion, we would like to keep the agricultural lease and the recreational lease as a single operator. I understand that there's other parcels that have been separated between grazing and recreational, but a lot of those are your smaller acres in your checkerboard throughout the state, which might work. This is a larger lease, and with a lot of deeded ground commingled in there, it's going to be very challenging to separate these when one can work with the other. Our track record shows that we are acting in the best interest of the state land board while also maintaining the best viable operation we can for ourselves. State trust lands are an integral part of our whole ranch operation. It's not just a stand aside piece of ground that you go into and you turn around and leave. It works for us year round. I heard an adage that really hit home. It says, we raise cattle, dogs, wildlife, and kids, which are the future lessees of your state land boards. It is preferable that the recreational and ag leases be the same term length, 10 years or longer, because we feel that short-term leases are not as conducive to long-term land improvements. And I understand the board took action in, I believe, 2014, but that means that I guess I don't understand if they chose to just completely do away with prior boards' recommendations and suggestions or what. And I believe on today's agenda, you are acting on a new lease, the Williams Park, which is going to be a 10 and 10, which I think is very commendable of you to let the lessees work and manage the land as one. We're committed to the long-term sustainability of our ranch. In 2024, we completed a conservation easement with the Colorado Cattlemen's Land Trust on adjacent property to these state lands. We have another easement that was put in place in 2011 with the Nature Conservancy. It is evident of our commitment to the long-term stewardship of the property and practices using agriculture recreation leases in our operation plan. Therefore, our preference is a long-term multi-use lease, given our commitment to preserving our adjacent private land for the long-term conservation easements. And I asked Jared Smith if he could show the map and explain the portions of our land that are commingled and stuff, because I know I didn't have the ability to pull it up, and I knew Jared could. And then I think he has some other pictures and stuff that he has. And also for our improvements over the years, I'm pretty sure it's in our board packet over the years that have been noted. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Camilletti. Jared, are you planning to show some slides or have some?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello.
So I provided Elliot with the map that Ed asked to have shown to the board, and so the map that is currently on screen shows the 20-mile parcel, which is in blue at the center of the parcel of the map. The orange that you see kind of intermingled, those are parcels that are owned by the Camillettis that are utilized in conjunction with their state land board lease. Also, the green areas that you see are properties that are leased by the Camillettis. So this is a really large intermingled operation. There's a brown line that crosses through the state land board parcel, kind of through the center. That's the main and only access, drivable access from county roads through the lease. And as you can see, it does cross over Camilletti's private into state land board, across their private again. Just I think to show that if there was a separate lessee, that it would be difficult to manage access on this parcel. Ed, do you have anything to add? I'm assuming, can you see the map?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so if you have anything to add on that, otherwise we can move to the photo.
Okay, well, the only other thing I would add on the road that goes through there is when we established that road and stuff, we have gravelled it, so it is, I guess, accessible during the rainstorm and stuff. So it's less destructive, erosion, everything else on the ground itself. So, which was another significant cost that we might not have necessarily had to do, but we felt we needed to.
Is that a county road?
No, it's not. My understanding, part of it used to be, but it was abandoned many, many years ago. And the line that you see does not follow the road that used to be the county road. And that county road was mainly when I was farming out there to get their wares to market.
So at the top right of the state land board parcel, you do see that 49. So the Route County Road 49 hits the state land and then ends at that point.
And also of note that of the parcels that you see that are privately there, a major portion of them, they are not fenced separate or never have been from the state lands. And this is going clear back to when my grandpa used to give me history of the country.
Jared, or were there some other photos that we should be viewing?
This is the other slide that was provided to us.
Okay.
And Ed, you can talk about this. This is, I think, a photo of the eastern portion of the lease where you've done range improvements. So if you want to kind of go into detail on what you all did and what it looked like prior to.
Prior to when my dad and I acquired this lease, it had been farmed, and it was in receivership 2 or 3 times. I don't know, at least twice. And it had just been let go, abandoned, essentially, and let go. And we came in and fenced and cross-fenced and used electric fencing to establish grass. And as you can see here, there's always a need for following up on weed management and stuff, because it was literally let go, and it was in bad shape when we acquired this. And we went in, and over the course of about 5 years, we were able to establish grass, good pasture and stuff. And we had to work on all kinds of ponds and reservoirs. The spillways had been let go. Erosion was taking place, which is an ongoing thing, but it's just a work in progress.
Thank you for these. I did have one quick question. Ed, what is the term of the private leases?
With the 20 Mile, we originally were in a 5-year lease because they didn't know in long term what their mining operation was going to look like. And when Peabody Energy acquired the whole mining deal, they didn't know if their stockholders were going to sell off ground or not, which they have sold some. So the leases have had to adjust accordingly. But there again, with Peabody being in, at the tail end of their bankruptcy, they didn't know from year to year what was going on. So right now we are in a year to year with Peabody. And we do not have.
That's ag only.
That's ag only. No, no hunting at all,
Got it. Thanks.
or recreation.
Elliot, did you say there were other audience members who wanted to comment?
I believe so. Nick, I believe you received requests for comment from other parties. I think you might be on mute.
I am on mute. We had a couple of folks sign up to make comment. If any of those folks still want to make comment about this item, use your raise hand button and we'll be glad to bring you forward so you can direct your comments to the board. So CJ Mucklow and Lane Iacovetto, I'm going to bring both of you up. And we'll give it the traditional 10 seconds or so to see him convert. And folks, when you can hear us again, you're in control of your mic and camera.
This is CJ Mucklow. I'm recently retired from Colorado State University Extension agent for 30 some years, friends of the Camalettes, and principally some of my work has been with the Camalettes on advising on weed control and preserving agricultural land through conservation easements. The only point I want to add, in addition to what Ed and Rudy have already said, is I think it interesting those ranchers that choose to put their land under a conservation easement in the long-term interest of the landscape, much like the state land board. There ought to be some consideration for that when they do have adjoining land they put perpetually into a conservation easement. I just want to make that point that they've done that, and it ought to be considered by the state land board for this lease and future leases for that matter. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time and your comments, Mr. Mucklow.
This is Lane Iacovetto. Can I go next?
Yes, please.
I just wanted to start by saying that Camalettes didn't ask me to speak, but I felt like it would be appropriate to speak on their behalf. My family owns the ranching operation to the east of the Camaletti Ranch. And as far as neighbors go, we definitely hit the jackpot. If there is something that needs to be helped with, they're right there to help us. They're at my kids' games supporting them. They're supporting our next generation of agriculture. They're active in our school. They're contributing back to our community as any, I guess, high-held leasee of the state land would be expected to maintain and operate their agriculture system. They couldn't be the gold standard of what you're looking at for a lessee. With that being said, I was kind of trying to go back into history to see how we came to the terms of the leases that we're at, where we're from a 20-year agriculture lease down to a 10-year agriculture lease with a 5-year recreational option. And going back through, I found the backup from the March 2023 informational item. And I was suddenly confused because in 1986, Amendment 16 was passed by the the voters of the state of Colorado. And it basically altered the goal of the state land. And it said in the blue book, I guess, it said that instead of maximizing revenue, the state land should also look at stewardship and best practices of land use. And that all of a sudden the revenue wasn't the most important item on the consideration for a lessee. But looking back through the information where the leases were changed from a 20-year to 10-year, it seemed like all of the facts were based off of the revenue, that the lack of exposure to competitive bidding for 10 years or for a 20-year lease resulted in agriculture and recreation lease rates falling behind. The lease rates fell even further behind the competitive rates. It didn't appear that the board received particular benefits from the stewardship programs where they were long-term lease. And I couldn't disagree with that more. I think when you have gold star lessees like the Camaletti family, that should be taken into strong consideration from the land board, that the way they are operating their practices and they're contributing back to the economic value of our community. They're held to a high standard of in the agriculture community as mentors to those that surround the neighbors. I don't think you could ask for more. And by shortening these leases down to 10 years, you're not supporting the long-term goals of the land use and stewardship of the property. You're definitely not supporting future generations of agriculturists on these lands. You're making a very uncertain future for the futures of these ranches, where in a county that agriculture is just falling so far off the radar. I think I would strongly encourage the board to relook at these policies. I think the state statute gives you the option, if I quote 36(1)(118)(1)(a), a lease of lands for grazing or agriculture purposes shall be for a period of 10 years unless an alternative term is agreed to by the board and the leasee. When I think that gives you the ability to make a lease longer than 10 years. I think it's kind of stating that 10-year is the minimum lease. When I look at our land, we're going into a soil conservation program where we're going to be reseeding a majority of our private land and would also like to do so on our leased land. It takes 3 years to establish a plan. And at the end of that 10-year lease, you're just now starting to see the benefits of all the work that you've put into the land and the reseeding project and the soil conservation, and you've made it look brand new just in time for the lease to be renewed. It doesn't really give you an incentive to do these long-term goals and land stewardship and to put the work in that needs to be put in certain areas, knowing that you're probably, not going to see it for the long term. It makes it a little hesitant to jump into long-term projects. The other thing that I would like to kind of comment on is things that Ed and Rudy both said is that the recreation and the agriculture parts of these lands go together. When we're getting ready to go into recreational season, we're moving the cattle out of those lands and letting them reestablish. We're working hands in hand. We're getting our projects done on those sides of the property so that it can be prepared for hunting season. We're not driving vehicles out there to maintain or fix fence. I don't know on a 5-year lease for recreation how you would book your hunters. Right now, I know that on our private land, we have a 5-year waiting period for our hunting. I think if you look at this from a land stewardship point of view, it is better to have this lease, recreation and agriculture combined for a longer period of 10 years. And I strongly encourage the board to have more discussion about this going forward. I think you're cutting yourself and selling yourself short when it comes to good leases and wanting to hold on to those for the long term, as in longer than 10-year term.
Thank you very much for that, Ms. Iacovetto, if I have that right. And thanks for your research onto some of the history too. That was useful. I'm wondering if any of the commissioners at this point have any questions for our presenters.
This is Commissioner Chavez. When was the reseeding and weed management plan? When was it adopted, or when did you start? This is for the lessees, obviously, clearing land and so forth.
It was prior to, and I apologize, I don't have all the dates in front of me, but it was prior to our 20-year stewardship trust when we started it, because we had another
Closer to 93.
Yeah, it was closer to 93 because we had another lease on it, the ground, prior to that, and that's when we started. if that answers your question.
Sure. Yeah.
Commissioner Heath has her hand up.
Mr. Heath?
Right. Thank you. First, I want to acknowledge the community engagement that the Camaletti family has been involved with. It makes such a difference in an area like that, and it's really commendable. My question is really probably more for staff in terms of the questions that Mr. Camaletti raised. For example, who's in charge of the fence, other maintenance with these varying leases, and also to talk about the Williams Park Ranch lease term compared to this, and what differentiates that. So maybe we could have a response on those items. Thanks very much.
Yes, I'm happy to speak to that. If the couple of items. One, we have hundreds and hundreds of properties that have these dual lease structures, and I understand that there may be other properties where people have seen conflicts between the users. Our leases, both the agricultural lease and the recreation lease, have been crafted very carefully with terms and conditions and laying out the responsibilities for the parties so that the different uses can overlap with one another to good benefit. And we have very, very few issues, and those issues are quickly resolved because of the way that we've structured the agreement. So we know that it can be done, it is being done, and it's being done smoothly, not only with private rec leases, but also the hunting and fishing access program, which allows public access, which would not be the case in this property, but that's obviously more complicated. The difference between this property and the Williams Park Ranch, Williams Park Ranch is one of 9 special properties that we issue RFPs for in a different format than the standard leasing procedure. And those properties, as you may remember, I'm sure you've heard multiple presentations on this in the past, but those particular properties are large land holdings where they are contiguous, that we control the entire property. They're not situations like this where it's broken up between different entities, and they're ones where we control the improvements as well. So the benefit to the trust in handling those leases differently and setting different terms and standards for them is based on the nature of those properties being different. And we also ask for different situations, like the waiver of the 118 rights in those cases. The longer rec lease in those situations is related to trying to encourage investment and improvements related to the rec side. And so, and also the nature of the fact that it's a contiguous large property, which is a different situation than this one is.
Thank you.
If any other staff member has additional comments that relate to this that would answer Commissioner Heath's question, please jump in.
This is Abe Medina, Recreation Program Manager with the State Land Board. Just a couple additional items adding to what Assistant Director Hoyt just mentioned. We do have requirements in all our leases, including AgRec and even our mineral leases, that all lessees are required to cooperate with each other on uses. Each lessee leases the property for a different type of use, the ag, the rec. So in cases where we have separate lessees, that cooperation is definitely more important between the lessees. They each have a different interest in the property, using it for a different purpose, and we, per our lease documents, require that cooperation. And as Assistant Director Hoyt also mentioned, we have hundreds and hundreds of properties where, of all scales and sizes, not just the 640 acre sections, but larger than that, in the thousands of acres, where we have separate lessees on the ag and the rec side. And in most cases, when there is any type of conflict that occurs between either of the two parties, we ask that the lessees notify staff and the district manager, and we try to resolve those issues between both parties so that they can continue to operate as their lease is issued. And that was all I had. Thanks.
Thank you, Abe. I see Commissioner Chavez has a question.
Yeah, and it's on rec leases, we don't offer 118 rights to any recreational leases.
Correct. The 118 applies to the agricultural component.
That's correct. We don't have there's no renewal rights in the by statute in the recreation leases. Only the ag leases have that.
This is Commissioner Frobe. Assistant Director Hoyt, I think it would be helpful actually to tie this all back together now about what the process is. So we've talked a lot about board policy, we've talked about other examples, and we've heard what excellent exemplary stewardship and community participants the Camalettes have been as our long-term lessees. This matter is about what's happening next. So could you just walk us through again for our edification of what the process for this land will be in the standard leasing process?
Yes, of course. And just to be clear, the reason that this is on the agenda is because of the request for review. And that request for review, I believe, was triggered by the fact that we gave the 1-year notification that the current lease was going to expire. So technically, no action has to be taken right now. We have made a recommendation that the board confirm that they support the idea of when this is let back out for lease, that it follow the standard policies. But that is not an action that has to be taken today. But to that point, we've given the notification that the current lease will expire. I believe it's next August, and at that time, it'll be noticed that it will be expiring. I believe it's 180 days in advance. We'll be taking applications for the leases, and people can apply for the agricultural lease, the recreation lease, or both. Certainly, the Camalettes are more than welcome, hopefully expected to apply and for both leases. And then we'll go through the process where there is a process for the agricultural lease that involves the 118 rights, which Camalettes is existing lessees with in good standing have the right to match any competitive bid that is placed for the ag component of it. The recreation lease will just be based on the bids that come in. And to remind everyone, when we review the leases, we do look at the revenue because of our fiduciary responsibility for the school children and our mandate to provide reasonable and consistent revenue. But we also absolutely have a process that values and measures and incorporates a consideration of the stewardship of the land and also the community involvement of the lessees. So those components, which were pointed out, was something that was a change that happened with Amendment 16 in terms of our overall mandate. Those are incorporated into everything that we do, and they were incorporated into the consideration of the current policies of the structure and the term lengths of the leases. It was considered by the board at that time that this set of structures that are in our current policies best meet those dual mandates for our beneficiaries.
And one quick clarification too, which was a question before it was noted by one of the presenters, that prior to the land board's decision to experiment with these different leases, prior to that time, a standard ag lease as referenced in 118.1 is a 10-year lease, except for if the parties agree to make it shorter or longer, what have you. So, okay.
Correct. Yeah,
So
and
the
then
20 years was a bit of a blip, right? It was an experimentation of how can the land board achieve certain objectives,
Mhm.
and these leases were trialed.
They were, and I included in the package a memo or a cover sheet that was written, I believe it was last year, for a presentation discussing all of these longer term structures and arguments that included, as was pointed out, one of the considerations is that it's been difficult for us to keep up with competitive rates, but also had to do with the fact that we're constantly looking and updating our best practices and our policies and procedures in terms of how we manage the stewardship components of the land, and the longer term structured leases made it so that we couldn't keep our leases up to in parallel with what the current thinking and policies and procedures of the board were.
Thank you. That was helpful. Commissioner Chavez.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with what, and this is for the benefit of the people online, or I guess we're all online. On our board leasing agenda today, just talking about rates, number 3, there was there's somebody offered double the rate, but they got less points and were not awarded the lease. I mean, they were offering $55 an acre and the winning bidder was 24. So, stewardship is obviously, I always, every month there are lessees that are bids that are much higher and they are rejected for stewardship. So that's important. I guess from my perspective on this one, the tenure, I've always been a proponent of longer leases, but I think the tenure has, as I've learned in it and watched what we do and obviously voted on some of these things, the tenure I think makes sense. In this particular case, again, my opinion, I would like to see the rec part tie up with, be at 10 also. We're doing that on Williams and others, but it seems in this particular situation that again, that's my view.
Thank you, Commissioner Chavez. Are there any other questions from commissioners or anyone in the audience on this matter?
I believe there's a hand raised.
Okay.
There is. Lane, you want to make another comment?
Sorry, I just have a question. And I guess I have a question because as a lessee, I have the same concerns as the Camaletti family, where we have private property intertwined in with our state land lease. And it's not fenced separately. How is trespassing addressed in those leases where the recreational user may not know where the property lines are? And then also access. How is when you have to cross over private land access into the state land, how is that addressed in your current leases? And then my next question is how I can see how this works on your squares on the eastern slope. How many properties on the western slope of this size have been converted to this lease? I'm just kind of perplexed that this actually works. To me, it's like renting a house. You rent the kitchen to somebody and the bathroom to somebody else, and they're expected to share the bedroom. I just don't see it working.
Yeah, good question. Abe, maybe you can speak a little bit to that, but we certainly have a lot of properties that have private property intermingled and also other public entities. For instance, Williams Park Ranch has a piece of BLM in the middle of it, and the access is not allowed to that by either of the users. So we deal with that situation on our property frequently. And the question about how many other properties have been converted to this, the only two, there are 3 properties remaining in this multiple use format. This particular property, your property, and then Brett Gray Ranch, which is on the eastern plan. So in the western slope, all of the properties are in this structure. Now, there are a few properties that I explained are those larger land holdings where the land board controls the entire property, and the terms for those are different because the nature of them and the ownership of the improvements is different. And so different terms have been set for those.
And A. Medina, Recreation Program Manager, I'll just add on the, trespass is trespass. Folks accessing, any of our lessees accessing private property that are ZIN holdings within our property is considered trespass. And we fully inform our lessees that if they are caught trespassing or if they're trespassing on private property, that private landowner has a right to file charges for trespass on those parcels. I'll say on the flip side, we also have many state trust land parcels that are in holdings within private property, and we deal with it from the other side, where we often, or occasionally, not often, but occasionally we'll have to file trespass charges as well for folks accessing and entering into the trust land without any lease or permission. I was going to say we have well, I'll leave it there. That was the main point. I think Elliot addressed the other one.
Raise your hand.
Are there any other? I'm trying to scroll and see if I see any. Nick, do you see any other hands?
I got mine up.
Oh, yeah. You don't have your camera on, so we can't see it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There we go. Mr. Camaletti. Yes, I see you.
Yeah, I'd like to just clarify one thing on the recreational part. I agree with Mr. Hoyt with what he said. Each parcel is different. So a one size rule does not fit all. And I would question the comment where we have a whole bunch of leases that are already separated. How many of those are on the western slope where our big game hunting has become such a business, and it's very integral for our businesses to survive and stuff, to have that part of it come through. I understand other parcels where there might not be big game. There might be, I don't know. But in our personal deal and our neighbors, I know the hunting is a big deal revenue wise and just to sustain viability in our businesses. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Maybe Abe or Jared, you could speak to the properties where there might be different ag and rec users.
I can speak a little bit to that. I don't know the number off the top of my head, Mr. Camaletti, but the majority of our leases, we have 450 approximately private leases. Of those, a fair number of them, I'd venture to say hundreds of them, are different lessees between the ag and the rec lessee. And the majority of our leases on the recreation side are primarily for big game hunting. So, that is, and I'll also add the majority of our leases historically in recreation are on the western part of the state. That is where the big game hunting opportunity is, and where a lot of the value is. And I'll agree, the recreation, the hunting side is big business. It's big business for us in the recreation program as well. So it is important to us as well that the different lease types, if we have those on a property, that they cooperate and work in conjunction with each other.
Director Ryan.
I just wanted to build on what Abe said. There are hundreds of these where the ag and the rec lessees are different, and Abe and our district managers work hard to make sure those uses are coordinated. Abe, I know you work with the outfitters to make sure they understand where the boundaries are, what the seasonality is, that they coordinate with the ag lessee. So this is not a new thing for us. Additionally, I want to, big picture, we have 1,700 ag lessees. We have hundreds of them. that also have recreation leases on them, and we make this work as an organization. It's integral to our success. Additionally, with these multiple use leases, we have had, as Elliot said at the beginning of the presentation, 33 of these were ever let out. 30 of them we've successfully converted back to a 10-year ag lease and a 5-year rec lease. And in many of those cases, the group that had the MU lease was the successful bidder on both the ag and the rec component. I think there's a presumption here that these are going to get separated, and that's somewhat up to the Camelettis. They can bid on both of these. And in fact, on the ag piece, they have the 118 rights. So they have a right to match any competing bid here. So this is something we've been doing for years. We're at the very tail end of making all of these leases be consistent throughout our portfolio. We strive for consistency with how we do business and with our leases. And this recommendation and the way we were planning to move forward with this is no different from what we're doing across the portfolio.
Thank you for that, Director Ryan. All right, I'd like to ask for a last call on any comments or questions, and then we'll be looking. Oh, hello?
I do have one quick question, if I may.
Sure, please go ahead.
I've not heard anything specifically said about the segregated leases. Which one would become primary? If there were conflicts, or which one would be primary, the ag or the rec? And if they're split 50-50, does that then require the rec user as well to cost share 50% of any improvements that may occur?
I can answer a little bit to that. Neither of the we don't prioritize lessees lease types or one over the other on our ag and our rec leases. Both parties have a specific right that they're allowed to use the property for under their lease type. The agricultural side, primarily grazing. The recreation side primarily is going to be a hunting lease. So use of the property for any other use by either of those lessees, is not would be a violation of their lease terms. In regard to improvements, that gets a little trickier just from the standpoint that who is depends on who the improvement is providing value to. And if there is an improvement, like say, for instance, a water system that would benefit both that hunting and the ag side, then we would, facilitate a conversation between both lessees if there's different parties to discuss how that might benefit each of their operations, and ask for joint participation of some sort to make that type of improvement. Or we could hold the option of just not approving that improvement on the property as well. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, and that goes back to the point of the terms and conditions for both the agricultural and the recreation leases have been very carefully worked out to identify all of those kinds of topics and issues, and to specify responsibility for each party.
Thank you for the question. And now, Nick, do you see any other hands up?
Yep. Any other listeners wishing to make a comment on this item specifically? Use the raise hand button. Commissioner, no other hands at this time.
Thank you, Nick. Fellow commissioners, I'd invite a motion on the proposed board order as contained in your packet.
I'll move that under consideration of the materials presented and testimony given today, November 13, 2024, the board determines it's in the best interest of the trust to uphold staff's decision as presented with this discussion topic. for lease 105700 as presented and discussed today, and also reflected in our board packet.
Thank you, Commissioner Scanlon. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Heath. Let's have a vote. Commissioner Clark.
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez.
You know, as I mentioned, I thought the rec lease would be better served in this particular ranch, you know, to match the tenure on each. Was there any other? I mean, obviously we have a motion and a second.
We don't have a second.
Oh,
And may I pause you here for just a moment? Ed, we have a motion of the board order as presented in the packet. We do not have a second at this time.
You do,
Yes, we
Commissioner
did.
Heath.
We started.
Oh,
Commissioner Heath
She
seconded.
did. Okay, that's right. We were in the vote. Sorry.
Madam Chair, can I make one comment with my, I think this gives more flexibility for our ag lessees having these shorter terms, because all of these rec leases are up for bid. And if it is not them who gets awarded this in one particular instance, they'll have an opportunity in a nearer term time frame. Also, regarding the possibility of conflict, that also shortens that time where conflicts could be resolved and or the lease changed with a new lessee. You know, locking in for 10 years with I think is not in the interest of our lessees necessarily. I get it if you're awarded it, but if you're not awarded it, I think that really is quite a long time frame to have to manage these kinds of relationships and not have the opportunity to bid again. So that's my rationale for this.
Thank you, Commissioner Scanlon, for that elaboration, and I concur with that, but hadn't had a chance to say so. So.
and you know, I agree. I think that sounds great, but I think at some point is reviewing the 118 policy for rec leases. I don't recall us ever talking about that, and we've talked at length on ag leases. But what was the reason? And again, I'm not suggesting we do that today, but you know, why there's no consideration on rec leases for 118. Again, that's for another date.
I'm just going to jump in. I think that's a conversation worthy of having, particularly when we have such good lessees, as has been noted today, that they have a benefit of some sort going into a rec lease bid. I would be open to.
Well, and again, in particular, you're just listening to what the Camalettes have done. You know, they're reseeding. I mean, I think thousands of acres, and so now the elk are going to come in there and, you know, eat some of that product of their efforts, and then they don't get the benefit of, you know, being able to hunt or have hunters on that property. And again, that's the way my mind works or thinks sometimes.
So I'm hearing that there is a recommendation for staff and the board to have a conversation about how we handle rec leases in our current policy. And I think that's a good idea. I don't want to include that in a statutory 118 requirement, but I think the concept is worthy of discussion and would recommend that to the staff. I would like to go back to the vote. We have a motion and a second. I welcome the conversation. We have a motion and a second, and we have a aye from Commissioner Clark, and Commissioner Chavez, I'm waiting for you.
Yeah, I'll vote aye. I mean, I just think in this particular, just based on the way this ranch is cut up and fencing, the improvements, the reseeding, the weed management that they've been doing over the years, it just better served that it would be longer, but I'll vote yes today.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Chavez. Commissioner Heath?
Aye.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Aye.
And the chair votes yes. The motion carries 5-0. And I would like to very much thank the presenters from the Camilletti family and their neighbors and Mr. Mucklow for enlightening us and for a very enlightened or helpful discussion on some of these topics. So thank you very much for taking the time and presenting and engaging with us. So I was going to recommend that we take a short 10-minute break. Are there any objections?
Nope.
Okay. We will then leave the public meeting and be back in exactly 10 minutes. Thank you. All right, our next item is the solar production lease in Pueblo County. And David Rodenberg, welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay, Commissioner?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Well, good morning, Commissioners. David Rodenberg, the Renewable Energy Program Manager for the State Land Board. This final action item is to recommend that the board approve a solar production lease application with RE Arroyo LLC, a subsidiary of Enel North America, to be ultimately constructed and owned by Xcel Energy. If the board approves this solar production lease, not only will it meet the State Land Board's energy goals, it will generate a minimum total of $938,000 over the term of the lease for the trust. So this related state trust land is 80 acres located in central Pueblo County, located approximately here. And I'll show you a more detailed map in just a few slides. So as you all know, the board has 3 key phases in the renewable energy leasing process. This solar project has gone through the first 2 phases, the first of which is the pre-application review. This phase includes obtaining feedback from all of the State Land Board's program managers, including the Conservation Services Manager and the District Manager. CPW is also notified of the project at this time and asked to provide feedback. There were no significant issues, and the feedback was supportive of this use on these 2 parcels. The second phase is the planning lease, which gives the developer enough site control to work on site planning, environmental studies, CPW consultation and input, and obtaining county permits, obtaining an interconnection agreement, and finally a power purchase agreement or off-taker. Prior to issuing a planning lease, staff reaches out to the agricultural lessee to give notice and to obtain feedback. The State Land Board always encourages our developers to include private land, particularly our agricultural lessees' private land when possible. In this case, Mr. Barr with Barr Family LLC, our agricultural lessee, had negotiated an agreement on his private land several years ago prior to the state trust land entering into a planning lease with the developer in February of 2023. So the third phase is a production lease, and this is what staff is recommending for approval for today. The production lease will allow the developer to finalize their permitting with the county and other details with the project, and then to assign, in this case, to assign the project to Xcel Energy, who will ultimately construct and own the project. So RE Arroyo LLC is a project company that is currently owned by Enel North America. Enel has been developing projects in the US for 25 years and has become one of the largest renewable energy providers in North America. They plan, permit, build, own, and operate utility-scale wind and solar facilities across the US and Canada. They have over 10 gigawatts of wind and solar capacity and over 1 gigawatt of battery storage installed. They are the 4th largest owner of clean power in the US. And in this case, Enel has planned and permitted the project, but will ultimately be transferring ownership of the project to Xcel to construct, own, and operate. So this particular solar project will include 2,656 total acres, which includes private land and the State Land Board's 80-acre parcel. It will generate a total of approximately 335 megawatts DC power capacity and have 168 megawatts of battery storage. The battery storage will be on private land. I want to clarify that the board packet mentions 422 megawatts total for this project, but that number is in AC. Typically, when we talk about the megawatts of a project, it's in DC. So I mistakenly mentioned 422 when I should have put the 335 megawatts to be consistent with when I talked to the board. So just to clarify that. For context, the Thunderwolf Solar Project was a 248 megawatt project, DC, of power capacity with 100 megawatts of battery storage. That's the board's largest solar production lease to date, which is entirely on state trust land. Many factors are involved in the amount of acres needed to produce a specific amount of megawatts, such as topography, environmental, or cultural resources requirements. In other words, some projects require more empty space than others. Additionally, solar panel technology increases each year to where less land is needed to produce the same amount of energy. This will level out, but currently technology is significantly improving every year. And I mentioned all that just to mention again the amount of acres needed for one project versus another project that's on state trust land. So the proposed lease terms include 80 acres of state trust land. Those 80 acres will have enough panels to produce 25 megawatts of power capacity on those 80 acres of state trust land. Staff recommends a 35-year production lease with an additional 24 months to finalize the interconnect details, permitting, and then to construct the project. So this map shows the project location and the 120 acres that were originally under a solar planning lease. The yellow parcels to the east are half of NextEra's Thunderwolf solar facility that the board had visited a couple years ago. To the south are 2 additional solar planning leases with 2 other developers. That's all this orange you see down here. That's state trust land, but that's under a solar planning lease with 2 different developers for another project. Here you see the 3 parcels that were under the planning lease originally. And then this map is a close-up of that same area where you see the red boundary line of the project that includes the 2,656 acres, and then the 2 state trust land parcels that consists of the 80 acres. This other orange parcel over here was under the planning lease, but was determined to not be needed for this project or didn't have the landscape necessary to be included in the project. If approved by the board, the project construction on state trust land is expected to start in spring of 2025 and to be completed by the fall of 2026. As mentioned earlier, the project will be transferred to Xcel via prior to construction. Xcel will build, own, and operate the project. And as part of the ongoing negotiation, staff is also recommending that the board give staff the authority to waive the assignment fee. In 2021, the Colorado Public Utility Commission approved Xcel Energy's plan to close the coal-fired Comanche Generating Station by 2031. This Arroyo Solar project is expected to be a resource to replace generation lost from the Comanche Unit 2's retirement and help Xcel Energy meet their resource needs through the end of 2031 and beyond. And that's located up here, the Comanche facility, and that's where the interconnect will be as well. And I also wanted to point out these existing solar facilities surrounding this project to the north, east, and west.
Wow.
So the requested production lease term is 35 years with a 2-year construction period. The State Land Board has language in the lease that guarantees the board will receive no less than the production lease rent negotiated with other parties that are participating in the project. These numbers represent that agreement as it applies to the 80 acres of state trust land. So the minimum revenue that the board will receive is $39,900 in one-time payments, and then a minimum production rent revenue over the course of the 37 years of $877,215, the total being $938,715 over the course of the 37 years. However, I wanted to mention that staff is finalizing their negotiation of the terms and expect that the revenue numbers will be greater than what you see here due to those negotiations, but this is the minimum total revenue that the board will see. When those numbers are finalized, we will communicate that to the board via next month's staff report. Our agricultural lessee is the only other landowner in the project with their private land of approximately 2,500 acres. They were notified of the planning lease prior to execution in early 2024, and then were notified earlier this year by the district manager when the developer indicated their desire to move to a production lease as well. The district manager was supportive of the project, but expressed some concerns with the soil types in this area, which are prone to wind erosion and undesirable weed species. Site-specific reseeding methods and restoration will be necessary to ensure range health upon completion of construction and at the end of the lease during site reclamation. Our lease language will ensure that these things occur. And this project followed all local land use regulations and will follow best management practices as identified in the lease, as well as CPW's best management practices for solar projects. So other considerations for the board, Arroyo has completed 100% of the project design. They've completed their environmental studies. They completed their consultations with CPW, and they submitted their Pueblo County permits, their 1041 permits, and they expect those to be approved by mid-December. So the project benefits, the project will generate significant revenue for the State Land Board. It supports the board's goals and supports Colorado's goals. So with that, staff recommends that the board approve a solar energy production lease with RE Arroyo, located on 80 acres of school trust land in Pueblo County, and waive the assignment consideration fee. The lease will include all of the terms described in the cover sheet and more specifically described in the board order. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions the board has. Also, Virginia Wiseman, who's the Regional Development Director with NL North America, is here to answer any questions as well and may want to make a few comments.
Thank you, David. Perhaps we'll go to Commissioner Chavez with a question and then turn to Virginia if she has something she'd like to add.
Thank you. David, just a more general question in looking at the board package, the performance bond, $650,000. Do those typically have CPI escalators? Because 650 in 37 years is, going to be half that.
It's a good question. We currently do not have any CPI escalators. We hold the bond that's noted in the lease, the $650,000.
Yeah. Again, just curious because again, it's when obviously Excel's not going anywhere, I don't think. And then secondly, in regard to the bond, do we know what it takes to rehabilitate or to take out an acre of solar panels? Because that works at $650,000 at 80 acres is $8,125. What's it take to put an acre back into nature?
It's a good question. We haven't really done a whole lot of research on that. We had determined that based on the acres needed per megawatt, it was determined some time ago that $25,000 per megawatt was appropriate. but it's a good question, and we'll certainly look into that a little bit further about actual numbers for that. I don't know that we certainly don't have a whole lot of data on what that would take, because the only renewable energy production lease that's been removed from state land board land is the wind project that was owned by Xcel up on the Wyoming border up north. And that's towards the end of its reclamation period. And we're still working with Xcel to finalize that restoration, but we haven't had to call the bond. They've done things according to what the lease requires and what the state land board's required for restoration. So, but it's a great question. I'll certainly look into that further.
And particularly on the CPI, on the escalation in the bond. But yeah, great work. Thank you.
Good question, Commissioner Chavez. Any other questions from commissioners? David, would your company contact want to say something, or?
I believe so. Nick, is Virginia online? Can you tell?
She is. She had her hand up and lowered it and put it back up again, so I'm happy to bring her forward. Visual lag. So, Virginia, when you can hear us again, you're in control of your microphone and camera.
Hi, good morning. I am figuring this out for the first time. Okay, starting my video. Okay. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Virginia Wiseman, and I'm an ELS Director for Project Development in our West Region, as David said. We're really excited that the state of Colorado has been participating in our Arroyo Solar project and its development, and even more excited at the prospect of having these state parcels be part of the finished project. It's great to know that this project will also be supporting state schools. And then I just wanted to thank the state land board staff. David Rodenberg and his team members have been wonderful to work with. We really appreciate all the support that they've given us as we've made our way through the process. So I want to thank you for considering our application. I can provide some clarifications on any questions that come up that would be directed at me. I can also mention that in terms of the decommissioning bond and cost for reclamation, as part of our 1041 permit, we submit a decommissioning cost estimate from a third-party engineer, which is used to determine the bond that would be posted with the county now ahead of operations beginning. It used to be posted in the 15th year, but that recently changed to the county. So there will also be a bond in place for the permit. The amount is actually not even net of salvage value, and we do expect significant salvage value from the project. So the land should be doubly covered in the instance of decommissioning.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Heath, I see a hand.
Yes. Well, first, just asking if someone would let me in. It says that my video is blocked. I have a question for Ms. Wiseman. Do you have any information about restoration in other national projects that you're involved with, especially in arid areas?
So we are one of the few companies that has decommissioned wind projects, but solar projects are even newer than wind projects. So there's not very many companies that have gotten to the end of a project's life yet to do the decommissioning and the reclamation. But in general, we are a very supportive company of sustainable practices, of finding ways to ensure that we are doing the type of land and vegetation management that is appropriate for the location and managing that through the life of the project. In some places where it's not arid, that means grazing or native or appropriate seed mixes. So yeah, it just depends on the place that the project is located and what would be appropriate for best practices on land management there.
What would be the longest that projects you currently have been in place and operating?
In terms of our first solar installation as a company, you mean?
Right. Just I'm trying to get a sense of how long these solar operations have been actually.
I would have to get back to you. I don't know the year of our first solar project in North America, unfortunately. As David mentioned, we've been in operations in North America for 25 years, but I would need to find the first year of our first solar project in the US.
Because I'm very interested in the issue that Commissioner Chavez mentioned, which is the eventual land use for projects that have had this kind of solar installation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Haston. Thank you, Ms. Wiseman. Any other questions for David or Ms. Wiseman on this issue? Nick, is there anyone out in the audience who would like to make a comment?
Yeah, folks, worth repeating. If you'd like to address the board on this item specifically, use the raise hand button. No other hands, Commissioner.
Thank you. All right, commissioners, may I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to move that the board approves solar production lease app 9102 RE Arroyo LLC as contained in our board packet with authority to the director to take appropriate action to follow up.
Thank you, Commissioner Heath. May I have a second?
Commissioner Chavez, I'll second.
Okay, I think Commissioner Scanlon, you beat him to the punch. So we'll go with that second and we'll take a vote. Commissioner Heath.
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez.
Yes.
Commissioner Scanlon.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. The motion carries 5-0. Thank you all very much for this.
Thank you, and thanks for the great questions.
And moving along then to an expiration permit to be presented by Ben Teschner. Ben, welcome.
Commissioners. Can you see me and hear me?
I can hear you. You're a little bit faint. Maybe speak up a bit.
All right, I'll do my best. Let's see how I can
that's
do.
Better.
See how I do on the screen sharing here. All right. Can everyone see my screen now as well?
Yes.
All right, excellent. So good morning, commissioners. For the record, this is Ben Teschner, the Solid Minerals Manager. And I also have, I believe on the call, Mr. Peter Friedman from Opt Industries, who is the lessee in this case. We're going to talk about exploration permit EP 113980, which is up in Moffat County. And I want to call out specifically Commissioner Chavez, who last month asked about rare earths on our properties. And this is one of those sites. And this property has the potential to be the State Land Board's first rare earth metals mining lease. And I tossed up this photo because what this is might be a little hard to see what it is, but it's looking down into a gold pan. And you can see some gold in this pan, which is a big part of the story of this property. But let's talk about the rare earths. Rare earths are a suite of elements that are ringed in red. And they're also often called the lanthanide series, not to give you any throwbacks to your high school chemistry here, but this is where they're located on the periodic table. More importantly, what are these things used for? And in our modern and changing energy society, these things are really important for especially making permanent magnets that are used in everything from wind turbines to batteries to solar cells, all kinds of different things. But they have a number of other uses as well, including ceramics and catalysts for creating certain chemical reactions and things of that nature. And then the other question is, where do these things come from? And in our current mix of production, the vast majority of these come from China. And they, you can see on sort of in the top half of this pie chart is China, and then there's quite a bit that also comes from Vietnam. If you zoom in on the United States, it's this tiny little sliver of global rare earths production. And even among the rare earths that are produced in the United States, we're still reliant on the Chinese for refining these rare earths into things we can use them for in those technologies I just spoke about. Obviously, this has raised some concerns among folks who are really interested in advancing our new energy interests and are maybe a little concerned about our reliance on the Chinese for this much of the supply of our rare earths. So enter the US market and Colorado specifically. The interest in exploring for rare earths has gone up in the last certainly 5 years, but even more so perhaps in the last 3. And the lease we're talking about today is way up here in Moffat County. Almost this property barely misses bordering the Wyoming border by yards. And it's so close to Wyoming. In fact, I had to tilt the arrow here to make it fit on the screen and not end up off the screen. If we zoom in on that property, you can see the Wyoming border shown as the dashed line at the very top of this map. And the yellow line showing the exploration lease area. What's interesting about this lease is Opt Industries also has a mining lease that predates the exploration lease, which is wholly contained within the exploration lease area. And that's shown here in purple. That lease was originally issued to them about 8 years ago for gold. This is an area that has historic gold production, but it's gold that is extremely fine. And Opt Industries has been working aggressively to figure out how to get this very, very fine gold out of this area in an economical way. Enter that image I showed you earlier here on the right, and I have a picture of Peter, who's on the line with us on the left, using one of the sluicing methods he was experimenting with to see if we could get this gold out of the ground in a profitable way. In so doing, Peter and his group sent the gold and what we call the heavies, which is this stuff, other stuff in the gold pan, off to a lab and said, hey, can you help me figure out how to get this gold out of here and what processes might work? Oops. Here's the gold. And the lab said, hey, did you know you have a pile of rare earths in this as well? And it was, oh, really? Perhaps we should be looking at this property a little differently, right? So this is not just a gold property, it's in fact a rare earths property as well. That's what led to the expansion of the exploration on this site and Peter's work to further define the extent of not just the gold, but in fact, looking at the rare earths as a important marketable product on this area. Since discovering the rare earths and outlining a larger extent of the rare earths, Peter has been working has drafted a 112 mining permit, which has not yet been submitted to DRMS yet, but is under review by me and others. He is also working with an organization called U.S. Industrial Minerals, which is a private mining investment firm. Most recently, the group that is U.S. Industrial Minerals developed the Ione property in California. This is another really unique deposit that's that has industrial clay. And this is a group that's really familiar with dealing with these sort of strange, rather unique, non-standard deposit types, and figuring out how to profitably extract them and then market them to larger firms who are in need of these things. In this case, the Ione property is now owned by U.S. Mines, which is a large industrial mining firm here in the U.S. A condition of this extension, which is really important, is that Opt Industries must provide a report to staff on the value constituents that they expect to be able to concentrate. As I mentioned before, this property has gold, it has rare earths, it probably also has marketable aeolian sand that can be used for other things. And exactly how the material will be concentrated and shipped off site is really important, because that's going to be a driver for how we structure a royalty rate should we move this ahead to a mining lease. Importantly for the board to know, this is likely a property that is going to be mined in a way that will look a heck of a lot like a large sand and gravel operation. We're mining a horizon of heavy sands that we sort of in the industry collectively call mineral sands, and that these sands will be dug up with a front end loader, concentrated, likely using some gravity processes on site, and then shipped off to another location, depending on for additional concentration and separation. So understanding that process, especially given that this is a brand new kind of deposit for the State Land Board, and to frankly a lesser extent, this is a fairly unique deposit type for the United States. The understanding that's going to be very, very important. Staff are recommending that you extend this lease for 2 years, but do so at an increased rent of $10 per acre. The standard rate for these types of leases is $5 per acre. That would result in an annual rent of a little over $5,000 per year. Obviously, the big goal here is we're setting up for some future revenue and hoping that Opt Industries and their investment partners are able to prove this out as a mineable deposit, and that we can gather enough information to convert this to a mining lease in a way that makes sense for the land board. And that future royalty revenue will be the big dollars if we're able to get it over that line. We're also going to learn about what are the appropriate environmental stipulations for this lease. I want to make a note that that this is an area that is in the broader greater sage-grouse world up in Moffat County. And when Opt Industries applied for this lease, they applied for a larger area, including a non-contiguous block to the south. And staff, in reviewing that, determined that it was closer to a sage-grouse lek than we were comfortable with, and decided not to issue that part of the application for this lease. So there are species of concern in this area, and as we understand the mining plan and the processes better, we'll be able to recommend lease stipulations that are appropriate for the activity. Staff believes that extending this lease aligns with our fiduciary responsibility. We're going to get a lot more information about this property that will enable us to determine whether this is the right move for us to generate this reasonable and consistent income over time, and to place the stipulations on the lease that would be necessary to protect our long-term stewardship. So staff is recommending that the board approve a 2-year extension to this lease with Opt Industries on 512 acres in Moffat County at an increased rental rate of $10 per acre per year. And here is your board order for your convenience. I welcome any questions. And again, I have Peter Friedman here from Opt Industries as well, if you have anything for him.
Commissioners, questions?
Commissioner Chavez, Ben, you're saying it's sand, but how deep would it go? 20 feet, 30 feet, or do you even know yet?
We estimate 20 feet in depth. And Commissioner Chavez, it's going to cost us $3,953 per acre to reclimate. And it actually would be cheaper if we did it ourselves, but that was determined by Division of Reclamation, Mining, and Safety.
Thank you.
Other commissioners? I have some questions then, Ben. A couple of these sort of, we are going to learn a lot about this. I guess the sort of business side of me wonders a couple things. One, we've had 3 years, excluding the whole gold mining business, which was a while ago, but we've had 3 years for exploration. And I guess we still don't have a report, and we're going to have a report. So I'd like to know how you propose to make this lease extension contingent on the report, or how you are going to capture that requirement. And the other bigger thing is, as I looked at this, and it is unique and it's difficult, I was intrigued with the fact that there is a capital partner, a knowledgeable capital partner here, but I'm not sure if there's a partnership or if this is official. And so I'm kind of getting to, no offense to the proprietor here, but how do we know that the next 2 years are going to actually deliver anything?
I think I'll let Peter take a stab at that.
Okay.
Well, our plans are we're continuing on our 80-acre mining permit, or not mining permit, but mining lease. And we want to expand out and see how that goes. However, over that last 2 years, over $1 million was spent in testing and research. So we do have data that demonstrates the grade, the minerals, all that stuff. However, these things are slow moving, and my partner group, they want more time to do more intensive drilling, which would be part of that lease extension. So money has been spent on this, and data has been collected, and I have shared that with Ben and the board.
Okay, and so you do have a contractual relationship with this partner at this point?
We are in negotiation for sort of final negotiation on this partnership. So it is in progress. Hasn't been a fast thing, and obviously it's all data dependent on our work over the last 2 years. So everything looks good from the data perspective. Just, of course, these things move a lot slower than I'd like them to.
Then tell me a little bit about the report for the concentration process and when that might be available.
Yeah, so the way we word this so we've done similar types of things in the past, not necessarily for this type of report, but we've said, hey, we want information before we're prepared to move ahead with this. And so the way the language works in a lease is we say staff will not recommend this to the board without first seeing this report. So it doesn't say that staff is, even if we do get the report, that staff will positively recommend that this move ahead, but it just says we won't do that. And now if the lessee, of course we have a process by which the lessee could come and say, I want to challenge that staff decision or whatever, but it's setting that expectation that this is what we need in order to make in order to bring it to you so you can make a decision about how you want to proceed.
Meaning relative to a development lease.
Correct. That's right. So any further, and in the way we'd word it, any further extension or conversion to a mining lease that recommendation from staff would be contingent upon receipt of this report.
And perhaps, again, just recognizing time is money and there's opportunity costs. Maybe Peter, what if this was 1 year extension? Can you get
You know, I would say that sounds great. However, sometimes some of our material's been in labs for 8 months. So,
Wow.
you know, it's a very slow moving process, and the labs are in Australia. We have to go customs, everything. So nothing moves fast. I wish it did. I'm from the tech background and doesn't operate at the same speed. I think 2 years would give us the flexibility to do the reports, to do the drilling, and have proper lab work. Unfortunately, some of the laboratories are in Australia, some are in France. You know, they're very specialized labs that have to do the analysis.
That's really interesting. There are none in the United States yet, I guess, because we have
There are labs in the US, but you know, when you're looking at some of these minerals are in phases that aren't traditional phases, but do contain the rare earths. And I wish it was an easy thing to explain, but it's complex. The chemistry is complex, and that's taken a lot of time to figure out.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And okay, so I think that's the end of my questions.
I'll just add, I think, briefly to the greater discussion that, you know, Peter's been working on this property for 8 years. He basically in the last 3 has discovered the rare earths component of the property. Yes, this is in some ways this is a fair amount of time. In many mining contexts, this is a blip. This is a industry that, as I've been a part of it, takes many years and often decades to get projects off the ground. And so, you know, I think it's a reasonable, given, you know, for the reasons that Peter's described with labs and moving these things all over the world, but also, you know, getting investment partners and bringing in very patient capital for these types of investments takes a lot of work, and bringing in the right partners for these types of projects is sometimes hard. And I think Peter has done a really fantastic job of marketing this project, you know, in the couple years that he's had since the rare earths have been part of it, and, you know, overcoming a lot of these unique. This is not just a run-of-the-mill copper deposit that everybody fully understands. You know, the capital partners also need to be comfortable with what is this strange deposit you have, and you know, can we do some more tests to show that this is in fact what we think it is and worth investing in.
Well, thank you. I really value your perspective as a knowledgeable staff member. So thank you both for illuminating sort of the time warp aspect of this.
You know, I would like to
Mr.
also.
Chavez? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Mr.
I'd like
Freeman.
to also add that this project sort of aligns in the just transition movement. Moffat County is transitioning away from coal mining, also coal production. If we can get this going, it could provide valuable jobs to the local communities. And, you know, we've done our fair share to support the local community for sure.
Thank you for that point. Commissioner Chavez?
Yeah, Ben or Peter, I'm just curious, the Wyoming where they found deposits, is that near this 500 acres, the one that's been in the newspapers on this?
No, that's on the other side of the state. Okay. However, you know what, there's a commonality between these elements in both locations. So they're somewhat distinct, but they're also from a unique or a similar source, but it's not right next door.
Is the Wyoming property a sand also? A sand, as you
there's I believe is in harder rock, and would, you know, you're gonna have to dent up the mountain. What's nice about ours is it's a surface deposit, and we've done reclamation. You can barely tell the difference between what's out there. It's a low quality sagebrush steppe, so there's no trees, there's native grasses, and fortunately not many invasive species like it up there because it's a harsh condition.
Yeah, great, thank you.
All right. I don't see any other hands. Commissioners, any other questions? Nick, perhaps members of the audience might have a question?
Yeah, folks listening along, use your raise hand if you'd like to address the board on this item.
I'd like to also say, you know what? I drive by the Camalettes property every time I go to the mine. It looks immaculate.
Commissioner, no raised hands.
Thank you. All right, fellow commissioners, may I have a motion on this board order?
This is Commissioner Chavez. I move we approve exploration permit 113980 extension as described in the board package.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Scanlon. All right, how might you vote, Commissioner Clark?
Aye.
Commissioner Heath?
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez?
Yes.
Mr. Scanlon?
Yes.
The chair votes yes. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you,
Thank you.
commissioners.
Thank you very much,
I appreciate the work, Ben. Thank you.
Ben and Peter. All righty. And now for the Williams Park Ranch RFP. Welcome Abe Medina and Jared Smith.
Good morning, commissioners. If I can get the PowerPoint loaded up, or should I do that from my end, Nick?
It's all you, Abe.
All right, thank you. I will load that up then. Bear with me here just 1 second while I get this going. All right, are folks seeing my PowerPoint?
Yes.
We've got the notes.
Slides with speaker notes,
Let me just
not the presenter view.
bear with me. Oh, I apologize. This is the PDF or the presenting from this to be able to see the group. All right, I think I got it. Apologize for that. Let me zoom in. All right, can folks see that? See the
Yes.
slide? All right. Let's minimize that. So, good morning, commissioners. Abe Medina, Recreation Program Manager with the State Land Board. This morning, I'm going to present on the William Park Ranch request for proposals, lease recommendations. Folks, the board should be familiar with this property. We did tour this property in July of this year during our board tour or our board meeting in Steamboat Springs. I'll be presenting, but we do also have Jared Smith on the line in case there's some questions for him, and We did invite the recommended lessees to also participate in this discussion as well. So with that, kick it off. So the Williams Park Ranch is located in northwest Colorado. It's a 7,300 acre property in the southeast corner of Routt County. This is a new property to the board. The State Land Board did acquire this ranch in late 2023. And this will be the first set of 10-year leases that will be placed on this property. Zooming in for a little bit more context, the property, as mentioned, is in southwest Routt County. It's shown on the screen here, outlined in yellow, and it is approximately 45 minutes southwest of Steamboat Springs and about 30 minutes south of the town of Hayden. It is also located on the northern end of what's known as the Flat Tops Mountain area, which is the green area shown in with the Rio Blanco tag over the top of it. So as mentioned, this lease is new to the board, and as has been common in a number of large ranches that we have acquired over the last 10 years, we decided to run it through our request for review process. It's a pretty lengthy process request for proposal process. It's a fairly lengthy process that requests from any interested party to submit bids on the leases being offered on state trust land. What you'll see on the screen right now is just a timeline of all the steps that we go through during this process, beginning with the request with posting of the request for proposals on our board website, and usually advertisement to interested parties or folks that we know might be interested in to review and submit a proposal if they are interested. This RFP process did include both an ag and a rec lease, both of them as separate 10-year leases. We did include in the board packet a copy of the entire RFP process, or the entire RFP document as an exhibit. And I'll just touch on a couple of items here in the timeline itself. Of course, the posting of this did go up on May 31st. We, as part of this RFP process, we always require that anybody interested in bidding on or submitting a proposal require a mandatory tour of the parts of the property, and this is to ensure that folks understand what they are bidding on and can appropriately make their proposals. Also, following that tour, which happened in July, we did have the process open until mid-August when we close the process to any new proposals. We are currently, we do go through a review process, a number of steps. We evaluate proposals as staff. We do invite folks for interviews or folks that we narrowed down the list of proposals for interviews, and we, if needed, do tour the selected applicants' home operations to get a better sense of how they currently operate. We're currently at the blue line here, November 24th, with our recommendation to the board as to the new lessees for this property. On this process, we did receive a number of applications for both of the two leases, both of the agriculture and the recreation leases. We received 7 proposals for the ag side of it. Those are shown here on the screen. Those are shown here on the screen. They did range anywhere from our standard minimum per AUM of $21.19 per AUM, all the way up to a high of $43 per AUM. In addition to that, we did receive 5 recreation lease proposals. Let me see if I can shift this. Can you still see my screen? Can you still see my presentation?
Yep.
Okay, just making sure. So we also did receive 5 recreation lease proposals. The bids on that did range anywhere from a minimum of $10.25 per acre, which was the minimum for that we placed into the RFP for any recreation lease. They range from that all the way to a high of $24.30 per acre per year on the lease. You'll notice on here that a number of the folks that did submit for agricultural lease or did submit agricultural lease proposals also submitted similar proposals on the recreation lease side of it. And then you'll also notice that on these tables, there are these asterisks next to a number of the proposals. Of all the proposals submitted, the folks with asterisks next to them were invited to in-person interviews at the State Land Board.
Abe, what we're seeing is the lower half of this slide is obscured by an opaque.
Yes, let me try and reset that. Is there a way to, I apologize, is there a way to share my presentation with it still being visible? Me being able to see the participants in the meeting?
Yeah, I'm not being separate. I'm not sure exactly how to guide you, but
sure. Let me try that share a little bit differently.
You want me to try to share your presentation for you?
Let me try this one more time, a different way, and see if this. Do you see my presentation at the start slide?
No, it's on the slide you just left.
Yeah, if you could, I'm sorry about that. If you could, if you could pull up the presentation, that would help, Nick.
Give me a second.
I've got it here, Nick, if you want me to try it.
Go for it, Elliot.
Okay. Tell me if you see that.
Do not yet.
How about now?
It showed Camaletti one.
Oh, sorry. All right.
How's that?
There it is. Thank you. If you don't mind advancing down to the slide with the agricultural lease proposals. There it is. So as mentioned, these were the proposals that we did receive on the agricultural lease side of it. And then if you click, please, Elliot, next, and these were the recreation lease proposals that we received on this. As previously mentioned, you'll notice that a number of the agricultural lessees, or the proposals for both ag and rec lessees, were by the same party. And then also you will notice that, as mentioned, the 3 asterisks next to proposals on which the committee did invite folks to come to in-person interviews. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the process that we went through. We did have a panel or the way that we review our RFP proposals, we do assemble a panel of State Land Board staff to review proposals. It's typically made up of folks with different types of specialties within the agency. On this review committee, it was the committee was myself, the Recreation Program Manager, Jared Smith, the District Manager, Mariah Pillmore, a District Manager from the South Central District, Justin Bieri, our Water Resource Manager, and then also William Woolston, our Field Team Manager. In addition to the 5-panel review committee, we also had our Assistant Director, Elliot Hoyt, participate in the process as a non-voting member. you to click next one. So the way that we review these is a little bit different between the ag and the rec side, just based on different criteria that's outlined within the RFP document itself. Application scoring and ranking on the ag side was focused on financial stewardship and community criteria. And on the rec side, we focused on the submitted recreation plan, financial bid, and past training and experience. This was the scoring and ranking that we did initially. This is the scoring and ranking that we do is to narrow down the list of proposals to candidates that we wish to bring in and invite to in-person interviews. And it is only one step in the process. The next step is, of course, bringing folks in and doing in-person interviews. We did have 4 agricultural applicants and 3 rec applicants who we invited to these 2 in-person interviews. And at these interviews, staff is able to ask more detailed questions about each individual's proposal. Next slide, please. Following this process, staff did meet and discuss all of the proposals that we invited to in-person interviews, and staff did decide that High Desert Ranch and Outfitters LLC was a preferred candidate for both the agriculture and the recreation lease. It certainly could have been 2 different parties, but in this particular case, it worked out that both of them both High Desert Ranch was preferred for both leases. A little bit about High Desert Ranch and Outfitters. They are a current State Land Board lessee on the Dry Fork parcel, which is 3,000 acres north of the town of Hayden. Randy and Cheyenne Sloan, the owners of High Desert Ranch and Outfitters, are locals within the community and do have extensive agriculture and recreation experience. They currently run a herd of registered Texas Longhorns. And as part of that, one of the things that was compelling about their proposal was a low stocking rate that they would run on the property during the term of the lease. While their stocking rate was lower than the AUMs assigned to this property, they did agree to meet or pay the annual AUM rate at the stocking rate that the State Land Board assigned to the property. Recreation is their recreation use on their current ranch or on their current lease, and then also on the Williams Park Ranch would primarily be outfitting services for big game hunting. And High Desert Ranch, as part of their proposal, did propose a limited amount of improvements on the property, items that they would like to see an investment in, primarily a hunting lodge, a hay barn, and some improvements to the corrals. Those limited improvements that they did propose, they also presented a plan for recapture or repayment of that investment back to the board. If you're one thing to point out on this property, as properties that we offer in an RFP process, the State Land Board intends to own all improvements on the property during the term of the lease. Next slide, please. So with that, the board or staff does make a recommendation to award the lease, both the 10-year recreation and agricultural lease on this property to High Desert Ranch and Outfitters. This is just a photo of Randy and Cheyenne and 2 of their children and 1 of their extended family members. But with that, next slide, please. Brings us to our recommendation. Staff does recommend that the board award a 10-year grazing, 10-year grazing and separate 10-year recreational lease on the Williams Park Ranch to High Desert Ranch Outfitters, LLC. With that, I can open it up to any questions or comments from the board. And we can also, if the Sloans are with us and would like to offer any comments to the board, we can open it up to that as well. Randy, do you have any comments to the board?
Can everybody hear me and see me okay?
Yes.
I just wanted to introduce myself and note that I'm open to any questions that the board may have about our plans for Williams Park, or if we have any questions about our current experience. But we currently operate on the Dry Fork lease, also in Routt County here. So we are certainly well qualified for Williams Park, and we're very excited about the opportunity to make it far better than its current state, and make the State Land Board's improvement something really special throughout the duration of our 10-year lease, and hopefully beyond that.
Thank you, Randy. Commissioners, any questions?
This is Commissioner Chavez. I just had a question for Abe on going back to our discussion earlier. You know, we're talking a 10-year grazing and 10-year recreation. What's different on this one compared to the whatever we were talking about earlier? I'm sorry, I can't remember now.
Yeah, I think, you know, so on these properties, as mentioned earlier, are we take them, most of the properties that we take through the RFP process are ones that we have recently acquired, or the agricultural lessee, where we don't have an existing agricultural lessee or recreation lessee, or in some cases, the agricultural lessee is does not have the 118 rights. This one in itself, or I should say, this process on this RFP in the 10-year term does match the other RFP processes that we've done on Chico Basin, Chancellor Ranch, Sherman Creek Ranch, and the North Mountain Ranch, which are all larger properties like this, all through the RFP process. The other recreation leases that we typically do at the 5-year term are standard, just standard leases. Does that someone answer the difference there?
I mean, a little bit, but the Camaletti Ranch was twice the size as this one. You're mentioning sizes, and this one is a little bigger, I guess.
Yes, well, actually, this property is about 7,300 acres, and if I remember right, the Camaletti's is about 11 or 12,000 in size. You know, this one, the other part of it, you know, on the recreation lease side of it, where we own all of the improvements as opposed to the as opposed to the recreation tenant or the ag tenant making those improvements. On this one, we choose to own them all, or our model is to own all the improvements. And in order to encourage some creative thinking on behalf of our proposers, and also our and some investment in infrastructure that the lessee will not own at the end of the lease, we offer a longer term as a result.
So, Abe, if I could summarize, you've said there are two important differences, Commissioner Chavez. The first, on this, we own 100% of the improvements. And so we control the entire ranch. We write an asset management plan for it. That's very different from the Camalettis. They own the majority of the property. They lease some other property. We are in holdings there. Second, we're asking the lessee here to make an investment. We will co-invest with them into infrastructure improvements that the parties need to get a return on. Unlike other 5-year leases where we're not asking for that to occur, there's an outfitter showing up, hunting with clients or hunting on their own. They're taking their antelope, but they're leaving. They're not investing into the property. So I think those are the distinctions here between this and the Camaletti Ranch.
Thank you, Director. William Woolston, I see your hand.
Hello, William Woolston, Field Operations Team Leader. I think that Director Ryan and Abe just gave most of what I wanted to say, but the one thing I would add, I really agree with something Commissioner Scanlon said earlier, and it was part of my process when we were discussing how to handle this one. This is a fragmented parcel and not a block, as you know many of the others are that we're just talking about. And I think that 5-year rec lease does give our ag lessee more opportunity to get back in if they happen to be outbid on a recreation lease. I think that's worth considering. But to Director Ryan's point and Abe's, to me, the other big part of this is that, you know, we're asking a lessee to come in and make some fairly substantial investments in these RFP projects with us. And that to me is the other big difference. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, William. Any other comments or questions from commissioners?
Commissioner Heath?
Yes. Could you say more about your plans for the hunting lodge? The location and a little bit about the scope of that?
I can give a little bit of a kind of high level context on that. So in our RFP process, we do allow our lessees to provide ideas for improvements on the property that would help facilitate their operations. And by them making a proposal does not commit us, and by the board accepting a proposal, it doesn't commit us to make those improvements, but it is an item that is open for discussion as part of it. So the Sloans have proposed, or High Desert Ranch has proposed a hunting lodge to help house some of the hunting clients that come to the ranch and will be hunting through their operation. They've described a location close to the headquarters or the area where we met at the beginning of the tour. But that was a location that is yet to be determined and discussed between the land board and the lessee as to whether or not that's a suitable location in both our best interests. So they had proposed to a budget of approximately $1 million for construction of that lodge. And as a part of that, they have offered to repay the cost of that improvement over the 10-year term of the lease, essentially dividing the cost by the number of years left in the lease that they can utilize the lodge. So it's one of the many ways that we have considered improvements on properties offered under an RFP. Does that answer that question?
Yes, thank you.
But just for clarity then, we're in these RFPs, the state land board owns the improvements. If a new lodge is built, then would the state land board not own the improvement and the recreational lessee is paying a rent associated with that investment?
That is correct. In this particular case, the way that it was that it would be set up is the repayment back to the land board would be rent for use of the new improvement. The land board would retain that new lodge if it was constructed, would retain ownership of that lodge if constructed.
Okay, so it's a feature of how the rent for that improvement is calculated.
Yes, correct.
I see. Okay, Nick, let's see if anybody in the audience has something to say about this.
You bet. Folks listening along online, if you'd like to comment on this item, use that raise hand feature. And I'm not seeing any hands raised.
All righty then. And Abe, that's an old hand, right? Do you have anything else to say?
I would like to add just a couple other additional items before the board considers a vote on this. Just wanted to say that we, in reviewing all the proposals, staff believes that the RFP process has been a good process in getting new creative thinking as to how our leases are put together and how uses may occur on properties, especially new ones that we recently have acquired. We did enjoy meeting with Randy and Cheyenne. We already have a relationship with them as they are current lessees on a different state trust land, but they did bring to the interview a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of openness to working with the board on learning this property and growing with the board in how the property is used and used as an asset for the school trust. So really enthusiastic young couple. We were very happy to see their proposal and to recommend them to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Abe. And I would offer too that the process that you and the rest of the staff orchestrated and executed on seemed very effective and brought forth some very attractive returns. So commend you for that. All right, well then, commissioners, may we have a motion on this board order?
This is Commissioner Chavez. I move we approve the Williams Park Ranch RFP leases as described in the board package.
Thank you, Commissioner Chavez. May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Scanlon, thank you. All right, for a vote, Commissioner Clark?
Commissioner Frobe, I got a text that she left at 11.
Oh, all righty then. How about Commissioner Heath?
Aye.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Yes.
Commissioner Chavez?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. That's 4 to, I guess, 0. Yes.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thanks, Aiden.
Thank you.
We loved our buggy ride up there.
Yes, we did. I bet you want another one, right, Josie?
There you go.
We'll go up and inspect the lodge. How about that? Okay, our next item then is road access permit in Adams County presented by Rachel Turner. Hello, Rachel.
My bad, Commissioner. I had her as a panelist or attendee still. Give me
Okay,
10 seconds.
no problem.
She's back.
Hi there. Thanks,
Hi.
Nick.
Hello.
All right. Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I will just jump right in. Hi, commissioners. For the record, my name is Rachel Turner. I'm the North Central District Manager for the Colorado State Land Board. Today, I'm here to recommend board approval of Road Access Permit 116991 in Adams County. Road access is being requested on a parcel northeast of Bennett. This is a 30-foot wide road and it totals 2.5 acres. So there are several pieces of the requested access, so I'll be breaking the discussion down into 3 parts. First, in 1996, Sharon and Stuart Pike purchased 80 acres of state trust land through an auction. This was approved through a board order. That board order included limited private access to the existing road and trail. The image here shows the 80 acres that the Pikes purchased in this corner here. And the red line up here shows the existing road. This was a permanent easement, which was granted as part of the property disposal. In 2002, the Pikes approached the board and received approval to move a portion of the road onto state trust land, which was away from their home. The green line here on the property border is the portion of road that they received permission to move. Initially, you can see the road ran right through here. Their house is located here. And so the road was moved so their house could be built. The photo on the left here was taken at this location where the arrow shows, looking northeast. You can see the Pikes house here in the background. There was no documentation finalizing this access agreement, and after some research and discussion internally, the State Land Board staff requested that the Pikes submitted a road access permit application to help document this road access. The road access has two pieces for the requested permit, which includes this existing road and then the secondary portion that would be newly constructed. As part of the application, Mr. and Mrs. Pike have requested to continue the road and will construct the secondary portion at their expense. The new portion of road would be along this blue line here. The photo on the left here was taken at this location in the southwest portion of the parcel. You again can see the Pike's house in the background. State trust land is left of the fence line and the Pike's property is to the right. There is an existing path that our agriculture lessee uses for farming equipment. As you can see, a developed 30-foot wide road would have little to no impact on the cropland. As mentioned, staff recommended that the Pikes submit an application requesting access to the existing road and for permission to construct a new portion of road. The reason that this road access permit is being brought before you all today is because the Pikes are requesting a 30-year permit term. Board has given staff delegation to approve road access permits for a 5-year term through the permits policy. There are a handful of other 30-year term road access permits that the board has approved in the past. But given the permanent easement already approved on the east portion of the property, staff feel that a longer term agreement for the road seems appropriate. Right now, board approved standard rate for the private use of roads is a minimum of $2,500 for 10 years. As part of the road access permit agreement, staff have negotiated with the Pikes on rent term, and it will be reviewed at year 10 and then again at year 20, which is to help ensure that the rental rate stays current with board pricing. In addition to the typical permit terms, additional terms include a 1-month notice prior to construction of the new portion of road. This is to allow staff time to notify our agriculture lessee. Secondly, the permit holder is responsible for all road maintenance and weed treatment. And lastly, if the Pikes no longer need access to the road, reclamation will be required upon request. In conclusion, staff is recommending that the board approves a 30-year road access permit to Stewart and Sharon Pikes in Adams County. And I have some time here if there are any questions or comments.
Thank you, Rachel. Commissioners, any thoughts, questions? Josie?
Yes.
Sorry, Commissioner Heath?
Is it supposed to be the lease term beginning in November of next year? Is that intended to be a year out?
Let me go back. That is a great question. And it would likely, if board approves it today, it would actually be 2024 through 2054.
Okay.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Heath. Anyone else? All right. How about a motion?
Commissioner, do you want to take?
Oh, right.
Prompt for public.
Shoot, I was doing so well, Nick. Darn it. Okay.
Anybody listening along, if you wanted to make a comment on this item, raise your hand. Seeing no hands, Commissioner.
All right then. May I have a motion? Don't all jump at once.
I'll jump in. This is Commissioner Chavez. I move we approve the road access permit 116991 as described in the board package and with the dates starting this year. As discussed.
Thank you for that.
Second. I'll second.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Heath?
I second it.
I'm calling for a vote.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Chavez?
Yes.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. The motion carries 4-0. And the second was provided by Commissioner Scanlon.
Excellent. Thank you all for your time today.
Thank you for the presentation. All right, moving right along, we have the oil and gas auction. Katie? And maybe before we start in on the presentation and conversation, I would like the record to note that we received a thoughtfully crafted letter from several parties regarding this agenda item. And the commissioners all received it. Thank you for taking the time to submit your comments. We appreciate it.
Right. Good morning, commissioners. It's still morning. Before I start, are you all seeing the presentation?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. All right, good morning. Katie Stitt, Oil and Gas Leasing Manager, and today I'll be presenting the December 2024 standard list for the oil and gas helium lease auction. This is a final action item that staff is bringing to the board for approval per the oil and gas development policy. This list reflects the consideration and application of the agency's strategic goals and the agency's mission. Strategic Goal 1G is to maximize extractive leasing opportunities within regulatory parameters. In the case of this list, rules related to wildlife and habitat protection, those interface with the existing contracts that our agency has, and regulatory action taken by the regulatory body, which is the Oil and Gas, well, it's the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. And the biggest example on this list is the no surface occupancy agreement that exists on the Arapahoe County tract on this list, and the approval of the comprehensive area plan by the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. And I discussed that in the cover sheet. By reviewing these tracts with the consideration of all the different factors, this allows the availability of the mineral estate for lease, but it also results in an operator needing to take and make investments to protect the asset that they lease from us. The red dots in Arapahoe, Lincoln, and Moffat County all reflect the location of the 5 tracts staff is asking the board to approve for auction and lease today. As discussed in detail in the cover sheet, the tracts were all nominated by industry and reflect a variety of interests and development in Colorado. Should these 5 tracts be approved today, they will be listed for auction with 12 tracts that were initially offered back in August, but did not generate a lease. This map will show the location of the complete list that would be given to EnergyNet should the board approve the 5 tracts today. The 5 tracts for the approval today are indicated on this map by the red stars, and they would be offered at the board's 20% royalty rate. The 12 tracts that were previously approved and offered in August are indicated by the blue dots, and those would be offered at an 18.75% royalty rate. You may recall when the board approved the August list, many of the tracts were nominated by staff to determine whether the market would support a nomination from somebody other than industry outside of Weld County. And we did have some staff nominations on that list that were in Weld County, and ultimately the only tract that staff nominated that sold was the one in Weld County. So staff does feel that continuing to offer the other tracts at the lower royalty rate will provide valuable information about market interest, but we do acknowledge that many of the blue dotted tracts on this map may not sell. And if that happens, the tracts are returned to our inventory, unleased, and they'll only be reconsidered for auction if a new nomination was made. And that begins the whole evaluation cycle again before we would bring them to the board for approval for auction again. So as I mentioned, the 5 tracts today will be offered at the board's standard 20% royalty rate. The auction opens on energynet.com on Thursday, December 12th, and it closes the following Thursday. As detailed in the cover sheet, the tracts were reviewed per the board's policy, and staff has recommended specific stipulations as outlined on Exhibit 2 to your cover sheet. And those stipulations address staff and CPW concerns related to plants and wildlife, and they reflect the current recommendations regarding those protections. And many of these have all of these have been reviewed by the board in the past, but I'd be happy to go through them again or take any questions you might have on the stipulations that we recommended, based on the recommendations made by our staff and CPW. So with that, staff is recommending that the board approve the standard list for auction and lease, which consists of 5 tracts covering roughly 3,200 acres, including the stipulations on Exhibit 2. And I provided the text of the board order that we included in the cover sheet, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Katie. And it looks like we have a question from Commissioner Heath.
Katie, good morning. Under the background on the cover sheet on this, it says tracts will be offered for sale. Isn't it for lease?
Yeah, so it's a sale for a lease. It's not sale for a property. So we can clarify that text for sure going forward, but it's an auction for a lease. It's not to own.
Right. I think if we just clarify that, that would be good. Thank you.
Commissioner Chavez.
Good morning. I was just curious, how is the helium extraction business working in Colorado? Are the mines, I know there's wells out there. Are they actually producing and marketing the helium?
So you kind of got 2 areas to talk about when it comes to helium in Colorado right now. Historically, on the far eastern plains, kind of bordering Kansas, there have been wells that have been producing helium for probably 30 years. There's a plant out there that does all the compression and gets it into the market. The newer exploration is further south, more south central Colorado, Los Animas County, maybe flowing further east towards Baca County. There are wells that have been drilled. The results of some of those wells, they're still under evaluation, but the reports from those operators is that the helium content is there in an economic way to recover it. They are planning on doing some additional drilling down there before they start looking at investment opportunities to build out the infrastructure, because you do have to have a compression plant. You do have to put some of these things in place in order to transport helium. Just because of the chemical nature of helium gas, it's lighter than atmospheric air pressure. So if you have helium that is exposed to the air, it just floats away into outer space. So you have to contain it somehow. So the results are looking good, but it's still early in the projects in South Central Colorado.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Chavez, thanks for asking the question. That was the big one I had as well. All right. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Nick, would you see if our audience has something to offer?
You bet. Member of the public, if you'd like to make a comment on this item, raise your hand. No hands raised, Commissioner.
All righty. May we have a motion for this board order, please?
I move that the board approve the listing for auction and leasing of the presented oil, gas, and helium lease tracts.
Thank you. May I have a second?
This is Commissioner Chavez, I second.
Excellent. All right, we have a motion and a second. May we take a vote? Commissioner Heath?
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez?
Yes.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Yes.
And the board votes yes. Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. And moving on now to a policy review item with Andy Bissett.
Good morning, Commissioners. Andy Bissett, Transactions and Record Services Manager. No slides with my items today. I'm presenting the Risk Management of Leasing Activities Policy for your review, and last brought it to the board in November of 2021. Staff is not recommending any substantive changes to the policy, as you may see in red line Exhibit 4 in your packet. There are only very minor administrative edits To give a little more color to the policy, it's an umbrella policy. As you may recall, there are other business line specific policies that detail additional financial assurance when impacts to the land are greater, such as oil and gas and solid mineral development. Additionally, we use a layered approach to risk mitigation through a combination of statutes and regulations, bond and insurance instruments, and primarily through our lease provisions. We have in place standard language in all lease templates around governmental immunity, indemnity, and minimum insurance requirements. As we often do, we consulted with the State Office of Risk Management and confirmed that the insurance provision found in our leases continues to meet the minimum requirements, and those have all been approved by the Attorney General's office. We use our Atlas system to store these lease templates in a repository for use by staff when new applicants and their leases are created to ensure the most up-to-date and AG-approved provisions are always incorporated. We also use the Atlas system to track and manage our bonds and insurance records related with these leases. Staff has a process to review all bond release requests, which includes field operations teams and district managers who inspect land conditions before bonds are approved for release. As mentioned, staff believes the policy is working well and is not recommending substantive changes. I'm glad to answer any questions you may have. And at this time, staff recommends approval of the proposed modifications to the risk management of leasing activities policy.
Thank you, Andy. Does anyone have any comments or questions?
This is Commissioner Chavez. It was related to when we were talking to David Rodenberg earlier about the performance bonds. Are there, escalators in those bonds as, because some of these things go out 30, 40 years that they, keep up with the times and inflation?
Yes, certain leases do have bond provisions written to include escalators. So yes, that is a possibility.
Thank you.
All right, Nick, let's see if we have any comments from the audience.
You bet, happy to. Member of the public, if you'd like to make a comment on this item, raise your hand. No hands raised, Commissioner.
Thank you. May I have a motion, please, to approve the minor changes recommended by staff as presented in our package?
This is Commissioner Chavez. I move we approve the policy review for risk management of leasing activities 200-005 as presented in the board package.
I second.
Thank you for the motion and the second. Let's have a vote. Commissioner Scanlon?
Yes.
Commissioner Heath?
Yes.
Commissioner Chavez?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion carries. Thank you, Andy, for that. And I guess you're up to bat again with our leasing agenda.
Thanks. Again, for the record, Andy Bissett, Transactions and Record Services Manager. Presenting the November board leasing agenda for your review. This month we have 11 items, which include 5 new leases. Of those 5, we have 4 agriculture leases on vacant parcels and 1 road access permit. In addition, we have 6 competitive bids, 4 of which are agriculture and 2 of which are recreation. I would draw your attention to item number 3 on the agenda to let you know that the recommended lessee received the highest score in both stewardship and community by all 3 staff members on the cropland competitive bid evaluation. Staff recommends approval of the November board leasing agenda and is available for any questions from the board.
Commissioners, any questions? Remarkably, I have none this month, Andy. Thank you. let's have a motion to approve. Oh, do we need the public again?
Yeah.
Sorry, I got.
Yes,
I
we do
thought
on this one.
You caught me.
I was
reading
thinking this one
something.
didn't need. Okay, yes, Nick, please.
Yep. Members of the public, if you'd like to comment on this item, raise your hand. No hands raised, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. Now I'd like a motion.
I'll move that the board approve the board leasing agenda for November statewide as presented today and in our packet.
Thank you, Commissioner Scanlon.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Heath. Let's have a vote. Commissioner Heath?
Aye.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
And commissioners, if you had a chance to review the minutes, did you have any modifications or comments on the minutes as presented? Seeing none, we'll pass the minutes by acclamation. And pending anyone having an undisclosed item, we will adjourn this meeting early, I might add.
Let me give you a quick update for December, commissioners. Our
Thank you.
meeting next month will be on Wednesday, December 11th. Right now, we have a relatively short agenda. So for those of you who like to sleep in or go exercise before the meeting, this may be your chance. But we'll run the meeting from somewhere 8:30 to 9 to about 11. Then we'll walk over to the Grant Humphreys Mansion and have the awards lunch where we honor some of our great lessee partners and some awesome members of our land board team here. So that will be an in-person meeting Wednesday, December 11th, and look forward to seeing you all in person there in your holiday festive attire.
Thank you, Director. All right. Any other questions or comments before we adjourn?
Happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and
Yes.
you.
Yep.
All of you too. Thank you for your hard work. See
Thank
ya.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.